and application of that knowledge is really usually very pinpointed.
It is.
So I agree 100%. A lot of times you find a so-called expert that you bring in, they may know all the terms, they may know all the things to say, but then they can't actually perform the work.
Yeah.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Back with another episode of Expandable.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about how to hire a specialist. Okay. And this is, interesting because you have a number of them in your bank. And I've watched, clients hire or been a part of that process. And so I'm curious, what is your thinking around if you were to lose one of your specialists? I think that's a really good way to think about it because, you know exactly what that person fills in that role. You know how valuable they are. And so if you were to lose that person, then, you're thinking about the value that they brought and you want to replace that value. Mm-hmm. Now it's a different thing if you are, scaling up a company and you're starting up a new role, executive role.
Yeah, because I was going to say specialists get really thrown out, especially like that term, like I'm a specialist, because there's always these new, line of specialists. And those are like, no. know.
Well, I'm talking more subject matter expert, someone who is very close to.
And that's been very over the years, and especially being a community bank. Mm-hmm. So at our size, a specialist for us is going to be a complete different specialist at a big bank.
Yeah.
And so, it does not, those characteristics of that expert at another bank to a community bank, they don't go together really.
Yes.
And I've seen that because you'll have a specialist at a major bank that has, 1,000 branches. Mm-hmm. All they know is a very minute high end on one area. And they just spread that out, and they've got a lot of people that work for them.
Yeah.
So they'll say the yes and no on a new rule, especially guideline. But then there's many employees that enforce that, that follow through that to make sure that practice is played out through the organization.
Yeah.
And so then when it comes to a specialist in a community bank, they have to be just as good as a big bank, but they have to have, personality. They have to have experience. They have to actually talk to people. Human. Yeah. They have to understand that just because you said it and somebody didn't do it.
Not a robot.
You can't blame it. Yeah. You're going to have to, okay, what can I get the best out of this individual? And, and I find too specialists, they don't get out of their own way. Mm-hmm. They'll be, an update to their area of expertise, whether it's in, new regulation or new addition to deposit compliance. Mm-hmm. They'll want to force something instead of, hey, well, who's actually going to be performing that task and collecting the data for this compliance for your specialty? Why don't we ask them first, here's what we got to accomplish. What's the easiest way to incorporate this into your, daily routine to where you don't miss it?
Yeah.
So I've failed miserably over the years of hiring a specialist that you thought was a specialist and maybe they knew my bit of that area, but they could not relay it over and they had no interpersonality skills. So
something I found that works really well is, and this is a hard thing, leading a company, but because there's so many things like this to do, but planning out ahead and saying, okay, it's almost inevitable that this is going to happen. So let's prepare for that time, whenever it might come. And looking at the specialist in their role and saying, what value do they bring? I mean, what is it that makes them special in their role that we couldn't replace, effectively? Mm-hmm. And then try to work with them to document those key aspects. And it's not necessarily documenting systems like you would on other roles and responsibilities, but it's more about documenting the value that is attached to someone who really knows that subject.
Yeah.
And so by working around and doing that, then whenever that person leaves, because that person can get hit by a bus, and then their intention was to give you 2 weeks notice, but then they didn't, right?
And I have found when you have somebody that's integral in an organization leaves, it's very difficult that you're going to find one person to replace 100% of what they did.
Yes.
And so what I find is a good percentage of their work is already spread out to the people that were working the closest with them. Yes. And so let's say you then break up 30 to 40% of what they were doing, that knowledge, and then 50 to 60% is that new person.
Yes.
And so then you hedge, I would say, hedge your bet as you're going forward, and as you're growing. Now you are able to spread that risk, and so now your specialty is getting diluted, but it's now spreading out to as you're growing, and as a person leaves, it's not as it's not difficult
so
as the beginning when you've got a few employees. One person, it's more dramatic. So as you grow, and that's what I find as we grow. Okay, that specialty leave, we're not going to replace 100% of what they did, because it just, you're not, because they did it a certain way.
Sure.
But you can find somebody that maybe does half of their work 10 times better. And then the other half, you spread it out, within the organization.
I think that's
that is really,
for sure.
That's
a good note too, like to be thinking ahead like that, to say, you don't want everything to sit in one seat. To some extent, it might have to, due to the expertise that's needed technically. But a large part, most of the time, it doesn't need to be. It can be spread amongst the team, which is actually better for, ownership and employee morale and all the things that go along, the soft stuff that goes along with it. I think the key there is documenting, or, to a hard degree, but like make sure you're capturing some type of knowledge or value that you can then look to hire around. Because if you're going out to look to replace someone, or you're going out to start from new, which is a little bit of a different scenario, but how do you know if this person can do that thing?
You don't until they start working.
Yeah, you have to be able to test them some way. And I think that to the extent that you can run a trial, is you have to open that door. If you can't run a trial, then you can't. But sometimes you can have them shadow a current person, assuming that person's given their notice and they're going away and it's all amicable. You can have someone come shadow, and you want to know, do they know the terms? Do they know, when you talk about this type of technical thing, are they giving you ideas, right? Because if they're not, and you're teaching them, that's only going to continue. And now your onboarding and your ramp up time is extended, exponentially, because now you're teaching them, and you're not the expert, right?
Yeah. Well, and banking, I found out a long time ago, people that were in the compliance arena, I found the vast majority of them that have held positions a long time at banks, and they're in that compliance side. They're not managing. They're just, getting rid of. And especially, not that there's any gray area, but when it comes to certain types of accounts, our president, they'll just have a black or white, and we're not going down this route.
Sure.
And so
sometimes
you get compliance that, you're completely not even truly understanding the regulations. The regulations say, yes, you can do this, just follow up with this and this. And so they'll just, I'm an expert, I don't want to do this and this, so we're just not going to, have that product or have that customer at all.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, you just don't want to do the work.
Yes.
And so the compliance side, I have really, that is a real area that you've got to spend a lot of time talking to an individual and not having them just, completely de-risk immediately.
Yeah. That's interesting, because it is then about the temperament and the personality more so than the skill.
It is.
Which is funny, because.
And you got people that, they like to be in the know.
Yeah.
And you see that and you're like, okay, well, maybe no, but actual practicality of it, you're not.
Yeah. You're
so now over the years, I've spotted those and can tell those a lot quicker.
And they're acting on behalf of the company, not themselves. If they were an independent agent, fine, make that decision. But if they're not, which they're not, they need to be acting on behalf of the company and making the decision based on that. So yeah, that's interesting. I find it funny, as a wrapper to all of this, that the personality and temperament of an individual in a role is sometimes more important than the actual expertise, because that can be taught. Now, ideally, you want both. You want the temperament and all of the things that go along with that, the nature of the person that is in that role, with expertise that they're teaching you because they're bringing it from, years of experience.
But in general, I kind of follow along is if you have an intent to learn anything, it doesn't take you long to become an expert at anything.
That's definitely
and especially
true.
in the business world.
Yeah.
So
Especially
anybody
with
too that
application.
also claims that they're an expert, they're not.
Yeah.
So any person that says I'm an expert at this, those are the ones to watch out for.
I agree 100% with that, because in the real world, in the business world, in the market, it's about application. And application is really, of that knowledge, is really usually very pinpointed.
It is.
And so once you can figure out where that pinpoint is, you can learn as much as you need to apply. And so I agree 100%. I don't think that the so-called expert, a lot of times you find the so-called expert that you bring in, they may know all the terms, they may know all the things to say, but then they can't actually perform the work.
Yeah, I've had that. I've had years where, early in my career where, I thought, I have to have a person that already has this designation because I'm in that field. And I don't have that designation, so I need to hire them, have that designation. I've had 20 years experience.
Yeah.
And find out, after spending some time with that person, 20 years experience, that designation, I don't know how they got it.
Yeah. Well, they're giving those.
And all those designations really don't mean anything because if they pay the money for the course, they're getting that designation.
They're giving those out a lot more freely these days.
It is on that. And so it really was. And of course, too, and if they came from the government sector and have a designation, no.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Never again.
Yeah, that's a rubber stamp.
Yeah.
I mean, in my world, the closest thing is sales, and being a reputable salesperson, someone that has done it, understands the method or whatever method they use. But you can't really know if they can sell your product until they start selling your product. And so that's where you have to have sort of a contingency on performance, I think, because if you don't, then you're beholden now to them to sort of, parse their activity in a way that, because if you don't understand sales, like you're hiring a salesperson, you're like, okay, I understand kind of how it works, but I don't know the nitty gritty of it. And you don't have the capacity to learn because you're doing all these other things. That's where contingency, I think, is very important. And that's where I talk about trials, or to the extent you can do it. You want to see, can someone actually follow through on the things that they've said that they're certified in doing? Because you're mitigating that loss that's going to come.
Yep.
Okay. Well, hiring a specialist is not an easy thing.
It's not.
I think that
you get better the more and more over the years, and seeing the different tales, but it is, hire slowly.
Yes. Hire slowly. I like that. Okay. On to the next one.